Hi everyone, Marcos, and I'll be talking to you about. Sorry, got a little nervous. I'll be talking to you about if it's appropriate to address people who are trans as GID, which is gender identity disorder. So when it comes to that, I'll be explaining three things, which is first, what is gender and sex and the difference between that. Secondly, what is GID, gender identity disorder and treatments. And thirdly and lastly, I'll be explaining a third gender that Samoan culture has adopted, which is Fa'afafini. So firstly, I'll talk to you about the differences between gender and sex. So gender is a social construct, if any of you didn't know, but gender is socially accepted, meaning there's a boy and girl. So when it comes to boy and girl, there's words that come into play like masculinity and femininity. It's not biological, and biological is sex. So in easier terms, a boy has a penis, a girl has a vagina. So there's a distinct difference between the two, gender and sex, and there are two different identities. And also there's cisgendered, which is when someone is born male or female, and they are assigned that gender or sex when they are born, and they grow up to be with that identity. So if they are, for example, when a doctor pulls out the baby and says, "Oh, it's a boy," and they have a penis, and they grow up to be a male and identify as a man, they are cisgendered. Okay, so once I have introduced you to what is sex, gender, and cisgendered, I want to talk to you about GID, gender identity disorder, and how that's really inappropriate, in my opinion, to explain what is a trans person. So when I say trans, I say it loosely. I mean transsexual and transgendered. And notice when I say transsexual, there's the word sex, and transgender is the word gender. So when it goes into transsexual, it is someone who is emotionally and psychologically detached from their sex. When transgendered is someone who is who does not conform to the binary of male and female, really inappropriately called cross-dressers, sissy boys, or sissy boys and tomboys, which is like girls who dress a little bit manly, and girls who are a little bit manly, guys who are a little feminine. So when it comes to GID, psychologists have developed this idea or disorder that the trans people are disconnected or lost in the sense of masculinity and femininity. And in other terms, it's more of an idea of a cisgendered person trying to understand this unknown of what is transsexual and transgendered. So it's a little bit inappropriate for someone who is cisgender who does not understand what it is to be trans to label this. Depending on the treatment, it really goes into who is treating and the family and doctor's ideals. So basically, if someone who is very open-minded really wants to accept what is transgender and transgendered, many of the cases parents would help kids counsel and encourage a really positive environment. They would help them go into hormone therapy, and ultimately they would have their sex changed. But someone who is very close-minded, very traditional in a sense, will call this a disorder and force a boy or a girl to embrace their masculinity or femininity. They would make their sons do masculine things our society has approved of, like boys playing sports and fixing cars and the color blue, while girls would hang out with their mothers and clean and cook and accept their femininity, which is pretty inappropriate if you try to force your child to do something. So once explained that it's a bit inappropriate and uncomfortable for people who are trans, I wanted to bring up the discussion of Samoa. Samoa has accepted a third gender, which is Fa'afafine, which is more of a bridge between male and female. Fa'afafinis are males, children who are born male and transition into this Fa'afafine, which is male and female. They are respected in society, and they help this transgender community, and they are never really seen as gay or straight. They're more seen as a third gender, and I think we should do that. That's it.
That's time's up.
That's it. All right, Marcos, the proposition is phrased as if it's an explanation rather than an argument, and you want a declarative statement that's a little bit more forceful there. You did preview what the secondary structure was at the beginning of the speech, and I appreciated that. That helps us follow it a little bit more carefully. But you have a similar problem with the secondary claims. They are more exposition than they are declarative, and you need to be making inferences on these particular points. I put down a note at one point about halfway through the speech that I hadn't heard any evidence citation, and I'm going to extend that to nearly the end of the speech. I did not hear an authority. I didn't see any publication that's referred to. I had some generic references to psychologists, but none of them were specified by name, discipline, and none of them were being quoted directly. At best, it was a paraphrase of some vague, unidentified psychologist that we're getting, and I think that's problematic. This argument seems like it's really based on an interpretation of definitions that there's some, and there's a big value-based element to it, because you keep coming up with this claim that says it's inappropriate, which is a value judgment. What is the harm in the labeling that you were talking about? If you think transgendered or transsexual are inappropriate terms, there has to be a consequence to using those terms that make them so. The only example that I get that you point to are hypothetical examples. We get a couple of hypothetical examples about what-if scenarios, or understanding parents or parents who are not very understanding, and how unfair it is to force kids into a gender role. I'm not exactly sure, why that's unfair, but that would be a value argument anyway. If there's a harm from forcing the kids into a gender role that they don't fit into, that's where your argument is. And so I think the problem with the speech here is that you haven't really focused on where the argument is. You've kind of defined what the subject matter is, but you haven't defined where there is conflict, where there is harm, where there is a need for something different than what we currently have, except in describing it without necessarily proving it. I think you do a nice job speaking to the audience, and you explain yourself well, even though you said that you were a little bit nervous. I didn't think you seemed particularly nervous. You did a nice job talking to everybody, so that helps quite a bit. All right, thank you for being first. We all appreciate it.